Time here on a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time. We got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts from 247 Sports and Kevin Noon on the Buckeye Grove, the rivals platform for Ohio State football. So please join those gentlemen on their respective sites. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing great.
Yeah, in the midst of camp, so, the season's almost here.
All right, folks, we'll take your comments and questions. I'll be scouring the live chat for what you've got there. Before we dig in on Ohio State football, I want to remind everyone that you can lay a few wagers on the games, and the way you can do that and get an additional 50% and also contribute to a worthy cause is grab the link in the description section below. That is next to the hashtag Sam Strong. It's for cancer research. It's in accordance with St. Jude's Hospital and betnow.eu. And myself and other YouTubers have been asked to join the fun. I'll go through the explanation elsewhere. But again, if you'd like to throw some money on the game, plus get 50% added to your account, you got to grab the link below and use the promo code MRTVCFB. Steve, you were kind of the senior member. You were the dean of the panel here each and every week. We're going to let you start on your observations from practice and what the sports writers are talking about now that the Buckeyes have been in play for about a week?
Yeah, they started on Friday of last week, so it's coming up. They would have their fifth practice today. They took Monday off to move into the hotel for the preseason camp. Honestly, the media has been there twice to watch the team stretch for about 30 minutes, and that's been about the extent of our ability to watch them. There haven't been any scrimmages or anything like that we attended. In fact, yesterday on Tuesday was the first time that we had gotten to see the team in helmets and shoulder pads, and not even, full pads, just helmets, shoulder pads, and shorts. So really, they are getting into the difficult portion of preseason camp when it goes to full contact and scrimmaging 11 on 11 and everything else coming up. I think there's a scrimmage this Saturday that they're going to have, and that's when a lot of the decisions are going to be made. People ask who's making a move and all these other things, and who's winning this job and who's winning that job. Well, it's still all up in the air for right now. We're not to that point yet to where I think the coaches are making value judgments on playing time just yet. They want everybody in the first week or two to have a chance to get as many reps as possible and then intelligently make those decisions on how things are going to be split up. So I think that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. And, you like a lot of what you see there: depth at wide receiver, depth on the offensive line, depth on the defensive line. Tomorrow we'll get a chance to talk to Greg Studrawa, the offensive line coach, Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach, and linemen on both sides of the ball at that point, to get an idea of what's going on behind those closed doors with those guys in particular, and see what really is shaping up. So those are some of my early thoughts, I guess, 6 days into this, and we'll probably know more after tomorrow and know more after we hear what's going on with the scrimmage on Saturday.
That's why we bring in Kevin. Kevin knows all. So if there's anything to be uncovered, that's why we bring in Kevin. For all things Jack Cohn and otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have any real answers right now at this point either. They went full pads today. It was nice for them to get out there and do that. We didn't get an opportunity to see any of that, of course. As Steven mentioned, we'll talk to O-line, D-line, and then on Saturday we'll at least get to see a little bit of maybe some of the stretching before the scrimmage. I don't know exactly what they have in store for us there. We'll get to talk to Ryan Day, so he'll be able to give us some immediate thoughts after that. Josh Proctor had a good day yesterday, yesterday with a couple of interceptions. The DBs had 4 interceptions, which, of course, everybody's going to say that means the quarterbacks threw 4 interceptions. But one of the big messages that Ryan Day has been about is you have to fail first before you learn from it and be able to grow from that. So, I think that all the reports that I've heard coming out of camp so far have been very positive. That they return most of the defense, 85% on the defensive side. Justin Fields has looked good on the offensive side of the ball. Jonah Jackson lost his black stripe yesterday. He's the transfer from Rutgers. I mean, he's going to lock down that one of the offensive guard positions, which is going to be clutch for the Buckeyes. And I think he'll provide a lot of leadership in a unit that really in terms of returning starters, it's Thayer Munford, and then Wyatt Davis had a couple starts. Josh Alabi is. He had a spot started in there, but, I think that's going to be really important as that line comes together, especially with a dual threat attack coming back.
What do you guys hear from the fan base? You guys hear a lot in regards to what the mood and the vibe is. And obviously, once they step on the field for game number one, they're not going to be satisfied unless it's 50-0 every week until they play a decent team. Then they'll be satisfied with a 3-touchdown win. But during the off season, with the coaching change, with the quarterback change, with what's happened the last 2 years, where you could look at the bright side being, hey, we were good enough to be a playoff team. We just weren't selected. Or no, look at that awful Iowa and Purdue games. And the awful defensive display most of the season. We weren't good enough. And even though that's still elite top 5 status, it's not, we're Ohio State. We don't want to be behind anybody, Clemson or Alabama or otherwise. What comments come back at you guys generally? I'm sure they're all over the map, but in regards to where this fan base is with this program, I would think it's overwhelmingly positive, reasonably, but they're not always reasonable.
That's a good point. I've got a survey coming up looking at recruiting and kind of the 4 classes that were mixed to join this team for 2019. If you re-rank the top 25 teams, it'd be Alabama number 1 and Ohio State number 2. And I don't have it here in front of me, but Ohio State was tied with somebody else for number 2, and it's not Clemson. Clemson would come in at number 8 in terms of the most talented team in terms of recruiting rankings, at least in the last 4 years. So that maybe Georgia. I think it's Georgia would be tied for second as well. So there's a reason why these teams are at the top, and I think that the fans who follow Ohio State closely have nothing really to complain about, because the coaches, whether it was Urban Meyer and his assistants or Ryan Day and his assistants, have done the work on the front end to assemble a team that puts you in position to contend for the national championship. Now, if you get the fortunate bounce, if everything kind of goes your way, you can now put yourself into the playoff and have a legitimate chance to win the national championship. But the fans honestly have nothing to be upset about or wary about. I mean, I guess maybe they're a little gun shy because, to throw your support behind a team. But, again, Big Ten champions 2 years in a row, 13 wins last season, have beaten Michigan 7 years in a row. There's a lot of positives there if you want to look for them. And again, as I said, the coaches have positioned the program to compete and win a national championship. It's just now a matter of putting it all together on the playing field, which is the last step. Obviously, Alabama, Clemson have done an amazing job and kept it between themselves the last 4 years. But I think any Ohio State fan who has dyed in the wool and has supported the team for 10 or 20 or 30 years understands there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. But all you can ever ask for is that your staff and your program is in position. I mean, you're not picked to finish 4th in the division this year. You're picked to finish 1st or 2nd, and that's where you want to be every year at this time.
Yeah, but I'll say on the other side, too, that there are people that are concerned with, the uncertainty. I mean, new coach, new quarterback, everything there. A lot of people, we're not that far removed from winning the Big Ten, beating Michigan, getting to the Rose Bowl. Those were the goals at that point. That's out the door, at least with where the program is now. Urban Meyer lost 9 games in 7 years. We all joke, what's going to happen to this fan base when Ryan Day's team loses their first game? Because it's not a common occurrence under the Urban Meyer regime at that point. But I do think that fans are cautiously optimistic. They see a roster that's coming back with a lot of talent. I mean, The team is back-to-back Big Ten champions. I think they see a schedule without that elite Power 5 out-of-conference opponent on there. I don't think that maybe that they're really looking at the conference schedule enough to see what a bear Penn State and Michigan's going to be. A couple of these little runs that they have there, that their carryover game or the crossover games from the West are Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Northwestern. I mean, that's about as tough of a draw as you can get. So, and with everything being said, I think that people are cautiously optimistic, but in some ways, I think there's still some people, just because of the uncertainty, that are just holding out, fully pushing their chips all the way in at this point.
Do you think that the angst amongst Ohio State fans, and again, I'm just picking on a certain group because many are reasonable and they're good fans and they understand how difficult it is to win the whole thing. And they also understand that it's selective, that they could have been in the running for the Final Four and been in the Final Four the last 2 years. That if you took a typical landscape of athletic competition where the championships were and the competition was more spread out, meaning if we went back to football of the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, when these dynasties were extremely short-lived, like a team won one back-to-back, rarely happened, and the national championships were spread out amongst 8 to 10 to 12 schools, not just this Alabama Clemson dominance, and then making Ohio State and Georgia and others just feel like, if it's put in that light as a second tier, that it would be more forgiving and more understandable and more accepted that we won our national championship this decade just because like 7 or 8 other schools did. But this Clemson Alabama thing has just made it driven Ohio State fans a little bit crazy.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think part of the issue is that we have such an unlevel playing field right now. Do you play 8 league games? Do you play 9 league games? Do you play all FBS opponents? Do you play an FCS opponent? If you're some SEC teams, do you play 2 FCS opponents? There's so much unequal, rules in terms of where the conferences are right now that it's hard to sit there when you have a system basically where you need to win your conference. I mean, we have seen the SEC get 2 teams in there, but you need to win your conference. So there is going to be a lot of angst out there when you have the Big Ten, which may be a little bit ahead of the curve or behind the curve, depending on how you look at it, with 9 league games, no FCS opponents. I mean, I guess there are 3 on the schedule across the entirety of the Big Ten, whereas it's like 15 in like some of the other conferences. So I think until a lot of that gets set up, we're going to have a lot of that angst out there because not everybody's playing with the same deck.
Yeah, I agree with what he's saying. I think a lot of cases it becomes an apples to oranges comparison. How many ranked teams did you play? How many FCS teams did you play? How many conference games did you play? And so on and so forth. And there is no easy way to compare ACC to SEC. I will say this. I've got another survey coming up looking at schedules, and you have schools like Ohio State and Iowa in particular and a few others that are going to play like 6 ranked teams this year. And then you have Clemson that's only going to play 1 or 2. And to me, that's much more important than worrying about, oh, they played 8 league games or they played 9 league games. I think it's Power 5 is what the barometer should be. Everybody should be playing a minimum. Anybody who wants to be considered for the championship should be playing a minimum of 10 Power 5 games out of 12. That's not too much to ask for. I know the SEC teams play 8 conference games, and most of them play at least 1 non-conference game. And their argument's going to be, well, our conference games are tougher than your conference games. Whatever, that's how you feel. That's how you feel. I don't know. There's computers that dictate what schedule strength is, and Alabama, even playing 8 conference games in Louisville last year, still had a better strength of schedule than a lot of other teams did that were in this competition. But I don't know. There's no one size fits all scenario, because every year the landscape is different. Who the teams play and who they lose to, who they beat. 2 years ago, Alabama was praised for playing Florida State. Turns out Florida State had one of its worst years in the last 50 years. So you just don't know how it's going to be when you schedule these games. And again, it's all apples to oranges, and you do have to use some of the human element in there to figure it out.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Kevin, we'll get to you in just a second. Just a little promotional break here, 9 o'clock Eastern time every week with these gentlemen and others. Tony Gerderman from the Ozone in particular, Buckeye Claire Crawford. We do it up big with Ohio State football talk again, Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern time. So don't be selfish. Don't just, bask in it yourself. Go out there and get on social media. Bring those folks in as well, family and friends. Kevin, your thoughts?
I was just going to say, I agree on, when Florida State and Alabama played each other, but there's a much better opportunity. There's a much better chance that's going to be a good game than when you're scheduling the Citadel or Savannah State or East Tennessee State or some of these other schools. I could beat the drum forever and ever and ever about just the disproportionate scheduling out there and this belief that, the SEC needs to have these lesser non-con games because of how difficult that conference is. You know what? Arkansas is garbage right now. Ole Miss is garbage right now. Vandy wins a game or two. Now I'm not going to be welcome in the South again. I'm not welcome in Wisconsin, and now I'm not going to be welcome in the South.
You're boxing yourself in, Kevin.
I know.
Geographically.
I just don't really. I don't think that they have much of a leg to stand on there anymore. In terms of, the SEC in particular has really kind of risen to being a couple team league, and then the middle is way down from where it used to be. The middle used to be a lot better when your Mississippi's and your Mississippi States and some of these other schools were playing at a higher level. But now, it's Alabama, it's Georgia. To a lesser extent, a lot of people are in love with LSU. I think Texas A&M certainly has some things going on right now. But, Florida is going to get mentioned in there. But beyond that, I think if you look from 6 down in that league, there's not a lot to really be that excited about.
Yeah, my scheduling formula takes the process out of the hands of the schools and puts it in the hands of a committee and gives them a metric that they have to hit. The metric being that they have to schedule 2 Power 5 games out of either the 3 or 4 non-conference, and those 2 teams need to have played to a 500 record combined the year before. That means everybody has the same schedule. Now, of course, you can't forecast how good teams are going to be and be accurate all the time. For that particular season, you can only base it on the year prior results, but you can create an equitable schedule, non-conference schedule, if you take it out of the school's hands. And to Kevin's point, for the last 2 years, Alabama's played Louisville and Duke as their big non-conference game. And people will argue and defend them by saying, well, they didn't know how good Louisville was going to be 5 years ago. Well, yeah, Louisville's been better with Lamar Jackson and had 8-4 type of teams. That's what we think of when we think Louisville. But Louisville's never a giant. They're never great. They're never Oklahoma, Ohio State, anybody like that. Ditto Duke. Duke is never a top 10 team. They're at best a 7-5, 6-16. That's what they are. So Alabama scheduling those 2 teams is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you. Duke's had some ups and downs, mostly downs. And Louisville, that program, it just kind of, they have one great year and then about 4 or 5 kind of down years. And, they obviously had Lamar Jackson and all that, but have not had any kind of consistent maintained success. Ohio State does not have a Power 5 non-conference opponent this year. The TCU deal was supposed to be a home-and-home deal, and that got bought out for a very lucrative game at the Cowboys Stadium, and Ohio State replaced it with Miami of Ohio. They are playing Cincinnati, and as Kevin mentioned, their crossover schedule last year, by comparison, was Minnesota, Purdue, and Nebraska, none of whom were all that great. This year, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Wisconsin, and at least Yeah, on paper, Northwestern could be a ranked team. The other two are certainly in potential to be ranked teams. So they have upgraded their schedule, even though it was out of their hands with the crossover games at the very least. But, again, scheduling this is where these schools make their money, is with these non-conference games. And Ohio State always has to have 7 home games, because each home game is worth $8 to $10 million, or even more than that now. So I don't know. Again, you're trying to balance covering your athletic department budget with giving your football team enough challenges to where they'll be a great team at the end of the year, but not too many tough challenges, because if you lose a game, you can be out of the mix really quickly. So I don't know. It's a fine balance. You're trying to serve 3 masters there, and some schools have found a way to do it, and some schools struggle with how to do it. But I don't know. I don't know that there is a perfect formula. And if you have a team that makes the playoff in any given year, I think that is a pretty high honor. People complain about Notre Dame making it last year. Well, they were 12-0, I believe. So I'm not sure how much better than that, what they would have gained by playing a 13th game. I don't know. So people say, oh, it would have been a conference championship game. If you take their 12 games and plot them out against Ohio State's 13 games, and go crossways like this, at the bottom, you're going to have Ohio State's game against Tulane. If you look at it that way, that was a meaningless 13th game. So I think the schedules, their 12 games against Ohio State's best 12 games, pretty comparable. Tulane meaningless.
But
Think about that. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, I don't think it's a matter of so much of them adding another marquee game of being. I think it's just another opportunity to lose. You come out, you play flat, you're not there. I mean, the likelihood that you're going to play flat in December is minimal at best, 0 probably. But it's another opportunity for the ball to bounce a weird way, for something stupid to happen, for another team just to come out just completely jacked up, for Iowa to beat Ohio State, for Purdue to beat Ohio State. You just never know. And I just didn't personally like that they were able to get away. They're this pseudo partner of the ACC, yet they're not part of the ACC. Make them play Clemson. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you're going to be pseudo ACC, well, get in a little bit deeper. Keep your NBC money. I don't care about that, whatever. But if you've got this every sport but football, but we're going to play 3 or 4 ACC games, just get in the pool a little bit further and play a December game. I just don't think that's necessarily right. That's not a. I think if we were sitting there, and if it was with BYU being independent, if BYU were a Power 5 team and would sit there and play 12 games and not be in a league, I'd have the same issue with them. I'd have the same issue with anybody at that point. So, I just think it's an opportunity for you to lose another game, because you just never know. It's hard to get up for 13 games. It's hard to get up for 12 games, but I didn't like it.
So to take Kevin's point and extend it and apply it as he started to last season, Notre Dame has joined the ACC in every other sport. Had they joined the ACC in football, that Clemson-Notre Dame national semifinal game would have been the ACC championship game. That's where the game should have been played. Meanwhile, we have Oklahoma and Ohio State, who have track records and resumes that are basically indistinguishable. Ohio State has the worst loss, but they've got better wins. They both have bad defenses, but Ohio State's isn't awful. They are very comparable teams. They both went 13-1. They both won a major conference. Ohio State most likely won the better conference, still got left out. Meanwhile, Notre Dame makes it at 12-0, and Notre Dame's schedule's difficult, but their difficult scheduling didn't come to fruition last year because Virginia Tech, who's usually good, was awful. USC's, who's usually good, was awful. Florida State, who's usually good, was awful. Stanford, who's usually really good, was good, but not as good as they typically are. They were 8-4 good. So Notre Dame, outside of Michigan, and they played that game at night at home to open the season. Never played anybody really good. To their credit, they won all the games, but what is typically a daunting schedule turned out to be a pretty mediocre schedule, and they got to sit at home, watch everybody else play a 13th game.
Yeah, I was looking for my Sagarin ratings from last year, and I don't know whether his formula is any different or better than anybody else's, but I don't recall people saying, "Oh, Notre Dame played a crap schedule." I think they played a representative schedule. I mean, they may have been ranked. They may have been ranked behind or ahead. I wish I had it here because I know it's very illuminating. Ohio State and Oklahoma were pretty comparable, I think, in strength of schedule, and it helped them obviously that they got to play Texas, whereas Ohio State played Northwestern, which was 8-4 or whatever, 7 I don't know, 8-4 maybe the day that they played each other. So yeah. So yeah, I think it's again, there's just no way to ever in this sport without uprooting a lot of tradition that we're ever going to have an apples to oranges comparison. I mean, Clemson could very well go 13-0 this year and walk backwards into the playoff without playing maybe one or two ranked teams. And you're going to have a major conference champion 12-1 from one of these other conferences that has lost a regular season game but came back and won their conference championship and played, again, I don't know how Sagarin would view it or whoever, will do these computer rankings, a schedule that's much better, much tougher than Clemson played and still not get in the playoffs. So, I mean, I can guarantee you that's going to happen. I mean, we know that. I'm just, hey, I found it. I found my handy dandy USA Today Rose Bowl. And there's the Sagarin ratings right there.
Well, somebody better be a fan of Syracuse and Dino Babers this year because I think that's about. I don't even know if they're on Clemson's schedule to be honest, but
they are.
I mean, yeah. That's the game right there.
This just in, according to Sagarin, Ohio State played the number 40 schedule and Notre Dame played the number 42 schedule. Now they played 12 games and Ohio State played 13, but boy, there's not a whole heck of a lot of difference there. And they were 12-0 and Ohio State was 12-1. I don't see where Notre Dame lost to Purdue or a team anywhere near as bad as Purdue. So, again, Alabama 44, Clemson 48. Notre Dame had a better schedule on paper than Alabama or Clemson. And people said they didn't deserve to be in the playoff. They played the same schedule and didn't lose a game. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll agree to disagree. I'm not gonna. I mean, I don't know. I mean, between the Sagarin, I mean, is that we're getting into stuff above my pay grade, whether it's the ELO chess or whatever, adjustment on the rankings and whatnot. I mean, and there seems to be some sort of variation between the two different numbers of what the old BCS looked at and where he liked to have it for where he would have liked to have had the rankings in terms of his computer. But, with that being said, I don't know. I mean, I'm not crazy about the ACC schedule right now. I mean, Clemson is, we're
going to find out at the end of the year. Clemson better be 70 on this list and hopefully get penalized for it, or everybody's going to do, well, how can you do? I mean, they play South Carolina. I mean, which I guess is on a swing backwards, to come back up, but what's their other big game? Are they at Texas A&M? Yeah.
That game's at home.
Yeah.
We played them on the road last year.
Yeah. And there's only one other ranked ACC team at Syracuse. So, this is kind of Miami could be in the rankings at some point. So we'll see.
But they don't play them unless they both play
potentially in the championship game, sure. I guess.
Yep.
I got to figure if whoever they play in the championship game will be ranked, but
Oh, I don't know about that. There's a pretty good run there in the Coastal Division.
Last year?
Pitt went 7-7 last year, and they played in the conference championship game. This is a regular thing in the Coastal Division. Marginal teams making if Virginia, who the ACC media voted as their champion this year, If they win it, that'll be a 7th division winner out of 7 teams in 7 years. They will all have shared
Wow.
it equally over the past 7 years.
That's parity.
No, that's meh, is what that is.
That's
not
mediocrity.
fair. That's meh.
It is. In that case, it is. I think what's happening in the Big Ten Western Division is similar in parity, but it's a higher quality of play. Not that it's elite. Nobody's elite yet, but what Minnesota's building, what Northwestern has built recently, what Nebraska's building, Wisconsin's already there. I don't want to say that they're there, that they've arrived. Obviously, they're 7-5 last year, but they're usually a really good 10-win type team. And then Iowa as well. It's a 2.0 or 3.0 version of the ACC Coastal Division. It's what it is. I think the Big Ten West is going to be fascinating this year with 6 teams that could win it.
Yes, a lot of great games. I left my sheet upstairs where I predicted it, but I think I have Nebraska maybe winning it. I don't know. The key for them, if they can beat Ohio State at home, that gives them a little bit of leeway. But again, as we saw with Ohio State, you can doink off a crossover game and it doesn't hurt you as long as you go undefeated in your division, as they have each of the last 2 years. You win the division with 1 loss. So, that's the intra-division games are always so important. There is some discrepancy in terms of crossover scheduling. I think one of these other contending teams, maybe Penn State, doesn't have to play the same kind of caliber teams in the crossovers that Ohio State and even Michigan have to play. But again, it all comes out in the wash. Win your division games, and typically that's enough.
Well, I mean, you sit there and we've seen crossover from the West with who they play out of the East, where teams don't get Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, or they managed to avoid it. I mean, Wisconsin has gotten that draw a couple of times. I don't know what the crossover games are in that direction well enough this year to be able to comment on that. But I mean, it is going to be interesting to see with 6 teams that potentially really could be in the mix. And I mean, it really could end up being a lot of 5 and 3s out there and going to a third tiebreaker at that point, because I think that the margin for error is going to be pretty slim. I mean, I think that Nebraska's the sexy pick right now. Everybody loves Adrian Martinez. I do too, but it's ultimately going to come down to how are they going to figure out how to play defense. If they figure out how to play defense, they're going to be scary. If they don't really get it all put together at this point, I mean, just put them on the wheel and spin it around, and we'll just figure out, who's the top 5 and 3 team at that point. But I mean, I think that's the real difference maker there. If Nebraska's able to put it all together, have that passing game with Martinez, and play a shredded defense, I mean, I think that they could easily be a 6-2, 7-1 type of team in conference play.
I saw one comment where they're saying that Nebraska under Scott Frost is recruiting as well as Nebraska has recruited in many years. And so I'm interested to see how that manifests itself going forward, whether they're able to get top-end athletes to go to Lincoln, Nebraska. I made the comment last week that we drove from Denver back to Columbus, Ohio on I-80 for most of the way, and then cut down to Indianapolis and went through Lincoln, Nebraska. And, you're in the heartland of America, and it's a really neat community and everything, but it is out in the middle of nowhere. It's not the most cosmopolitan place in the world. Omaha's a pretty neat city as well, but it's nearly an hour away. So I don't know. And again, I'm not overly critical about Nebraska. I think it's been a great addition football-wise to the Big Ten, and created a little bit more interest perhaps. But again, this is a program that hasn't won a conference championship since '99 or something like that. It's almost 20 years or something. So I mean, they played for a national championship in '01, but didn't win the conference that year. So it's I don't know. It's weird. You hear people there talk about, we had it better off in the Big 12 playing against Oklahoma and Texas, who are more natural rivals. You hear Penn State people talk about how they were better off as an independent, playing like Notre Dame, playing in schools from across the country and whatever. But it's also given those schools financial stability and independence to be part of something as massive as the Big Ten Network, and this Fox deal that is making them all rich. So, they print more TV money every year, and they have to go out and invent more ways to spend it. And, that's just the way of the world, I guess.
All right, everyone. This is your spot for Ohio State football talk each and every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time. We've got Steve Hellwagon on the line from 247 Sports Bucknuts. We got Kevin Noon on the line from Rivals Buckeye Grove. I know, Kevin, that you've also got a YouTube channel as well, so you can join Kevin over there. I believe I've come across some of your posts there.
Yeah, we try to get all the pressers up there, and we're putting some of our podcasts there, including our Unscripted Ohio show. So, give us a listen.
And if you bet on the football games, again, grab the link where it says Sam Strong and the hashtag, the link right there. Use the promo code MRTVCFB. It's for a worthy cause. Plus, you get 50% added to your account to bet on the football games. All right. Also, Amazon Shopping. Use the link down below. You help support the channel by doing any of these things. And, of course, like, comment, share, and subscribe. And we got Ohio State football talk, so don't be selfish. Go out there and let people know that we're here, because we should be able to build a very nice audience as we get the Buckeyes prepared for 2019 and Lane Kiffin and FAU. I don't know if that's going to deserve like a 3 or 4 week breakdown, but we'll definitely get to it the final week before they actually hit the field at Ohio Stadium. All right. Before we do we even dive into this 16 team all-time format with the teams? I don't know. We could be talking forever, and we don't need to do any of that. But to give Steve's platform a plug there, the extension of the the 247, they've got a what they call a college football jam. They've got who's the best football team ever. They're only looking at teams post 1988. I don't know where the breakoff was, but the teams all in the 16 in the field are all post 1988, and the Buckeyes from 2014 are at number 9. And a very curious number 1 in Florida State. Sure, they went undefeated in 2013, but they played in that awful ACC Coastal Division. They didn't play in the Coastal, but they played the Coastal. Their conference championship opponent that year was Duke, who lost 5 games. So that's what FSU had to do to reach a number 1 ranking in this all-time grid here. So we'll not give it any play, at least tonight. And I'm sure by next week with recruiting and camp news, we might have a little bit more to talk about with these gentlemen. You guys do a stellar job each and every week. We appreciate you jumping on, Kevin, Steve.
Glad to be here as always.
We will catch up with you next week. Thank you so much. And of course, again, join Steve at Bucknuts and Kevin at the Buckeye Grove. All right. We'll see everyone next week. Bring your comments and questions. We will see you next week for Ohio State football talk as we get another week closer. There's the countdown to Ohio State football 2019.
All right, take care.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.